At this point, she's having lunch with the CEO of her company, and he's asking her kind of about her travels. She's wearing a cross, an Ethiopian cross necklace. Her fingers wrapped around the cross before she sat back in her chair and let it go. Well, actually, I'm not a very religious person. I found this in Ethiopia. It's an extraordinary place. I wanted a reminder. She thought of Stefano. They had traveled there together. Go on. She forced herself to redirect her thoughts. The Christianity in Ethiopia is an ancient and elaborate tradition. It would hardly be recognizable to my Protestant parents as Christianity. It felt in some places like in Brazil, where you can see forms of Catholicism so adapted to the indigenous culture, the Pope would call them blasphemous. I was in Rio last year for Carnival. That didn't look very Catholic to me, but I haven't been in the bush. It's not exactly my style. Timothy, the CEO, stabbed his dessert with his fork. I love to be in the field. If I'm in the city for too long, I start to feel as if something is suffocating me. Timothy clasped his well-manicured hands under his chin and looked in her eyes. Who do you travel with? Usually alone. And aren't you afraid of going alone? Ruth raised an eyebrow to this question. You mean because I'm a woman? No, I just mean being alone. No, being alone has never made me afraid, and I always knew once I got to where I was going, I wouldn't be alone. I made connections, friendships in the villages I went to. In some places, I got very close to the people I worked with. I could go to a dozen villages in South America, and people would welcome me in as family. And what's the appeal of their lives? How could she explain to a man like Timothy Crosby, a man who was never away from his mobile phone, a man who checked Klaus Pharmaceuticals stock every hour, a man who traveled in precise first-world comfort, the appeal of what looked like a dirty, brutish, superstitious experience? Time, she said. Time? Time, in the sense we measure it, can disappear in a forest village. There isn't time. There's only an unquantifiable sense of motion, of life going forward. No, not forward, a sense of life going around, of hunting and eating, of laughing and playing, of sickness and healing, birth and death. If I've had any fear in the field, it was a fear that that timelessness would be destroyed. Roads would come in, trees would come down, and the people I knew would be dominated by time the way our society is. He sat back in his chair and looked thoughtful. If I could imagine how that would feel, it would probably be something like bliss. Yes, it is something like bliss. The waiter came to the table. Is there anything else I can get for you? Timothy didn't look at the waiter, only smiled at Ruth and said, just the check, please. He pushed back his French cuff, bringing his oversized platinum watch into view. Well, it seems we have let your South American jungle time invade our world. It's almost 3. I have a conference call in 30 minutes. She smiled her slightly crooked smile, full of irony, and said, exactly, it's time. So.